Exactly, 30%. Of course, if you were smart and you went to Delhi and you cried and you pleaded, they increased the customs duties further. So at one point in time, the customs duties went up to 110%. That means if you were selling a product at 100 rupees, I mean, BSF was shipping it on the docks at 100 rupees, the market price would be 210 plus freight. And you could sell it at 210. And that was the situation all the way to 1991. By which time, you can imagine this whole country had got into a mess. And we owed the whole world so much money that we had to ship gold out to the Bank of England, which by the way is still lying in the Bank of England. Because the cost of bringing it back and the insurance for that is too expensive. So the Bank of England is still holding that gold. And
safer there.
Yeah, it's safer probably. Okay, you never know what happens. So in 1991, things started to change. They did a lot of what the DB1 stands for debottlenecking. That's an Indian word. In a chemical plant, you have many processes. Like any system, I don't know if you guys have theory of constraints in your part of these things, but anyway, I'll give you a brief idea of what it is. It's really any kind of system will have a number of processes. One of the processes is probably a bottleneck. It defines the total capacity of the whole line. I'm putting it in simple words. The moment you change the capacity or exploit that weak link or the smallest link, the capacity increases. So in chemical plants, normally there are many processes which happen, and probably happens. The same thing applies to light engineering also, which is a similar kind of situation. And you exploit that weakness, the whole capacity increases. So chemical plants tend to debottleneck regularly, like they have done, DB1, DB2, DB3, and they expanded from something like 1,200 tons per year to 2,600 tons per year. Now, I'll just give you a proportionate size. The market at that time was about 4,000 or 5,000 tons of ethyleneamines in the country. The world market at that time was something like 500,000 tons. You can imagine the proportion in which we were. Less than 1%, just about 1% of the world market. Now, what happened over a period of time, because they were domestic, they had all this duty protection, they managed to get their product right, quality right, they kept their customers, they managed to get over 70% of their market share. And they were very profitable. In fact, in 91, they were more profitable than alkylamines. And then things started going wrong. What happened? One, debt equity, they kept growing, they put money into the business, but it was not efficient. So the debt equity was something like 2:1, that means the debt was 2 times the net worth. Anything going wrong would have tilted the ship and you would have gone under. The other thing they missed was they had a number of opportunities that they tried, but they didn't follow it up. First was to try and change the manufacturing process by another route which looked cheaper. The monoethanol amination route they tried. But they didn't follow it up because they were making money in the current route, which is the ethylene dichloride route with ammonia making ethyleneamines. Then they tried to go downstream and build derivatives on a pilot plant, didn't put enough effort and didn't go through. And they also tried to diversify into something called rifampicin, which is an anti-malarial drug with Chinese technology. And not only did it diversify not in Baroda, but they went to UP to diversify because the UP government offered them cheaper farms. Now, what happened in 93-94? Profits halved. By 95-96, cash losses. They had to bring back their old general manager, Mr. Chabra, to become managing director, saying, "Yeah, we are in trouble. Why don't you come back and help us out?" To tide over the liquidity crisis, they had a rights issue, they asked their shareholders to pump in more money. So it was a mess. By 95, the company was in a mess. Now, which is not on the slide. What happened to alkyl ions? Oh, we'll come to that later. I'll come to that. Why did we get to that mess? What is it when you diagnosed it? Of course, this is all hindsight. Hindsight is always 20/20. You know exactly what went wrong. But that's after they went. It's never before. While things are going wrong, you don't know what's going wrong. So one of the things was their size was too small. In a chemical company, energies are a major driver of costs. The larger you are, the distribution of energy is smaller. So your percentage of the product cost in a larger, up to a point, of course. So that's what they call economics of scale. So your overheads get written across larger volumes, your energies get written across larger volumes. So if you have a small plant, your unit product cost is likely to be more. So this is one of the problems they had. They were 3,000 tons per year kind of thing. The world capacity, the smallest was 15,000. And there were companies with 100,000.
Can I intervene for a minute? Because I think it's important. You just mentioned, no, it's okay. You mentioned that they were doing well in the earlier decade and they had 70% market share. So would it be really right to say that they had a smaller plant? Was the plant in line with the market expectations and therefore they set up small plant? Because I think we should see from both the angles.
Yes, I think, see, they set up that plant because the market was only 5,000 tons. So what's the point in setting up a 3,000 ton plant?
Exactly, so I think we need to have that in mind.
The Chinese went differently. They went to a 15,000 ton or 30,000 ton plant and exported to the West.
Yes.
While their domestic market was growing. And they got all kinds of support from the government to do it. India didn't do it in time.
Correct.
That was a mistake we made at that time. So that was one of the issues. Then the duty, you guys are probably too young to remember this. 91 was a kind of a liberalization. You may have seen the TV videos where I was live in front of the TV when Manmohan Singh got up to give his budget speech. And literally it sent goosebumps down my spine. It was amazing. Because it's once in a lifetime you live through a change in a country which is dramatic. And everybody who was in business realized this is a dramatic change. It knocked off licenses. He said, you are going to compete with the world, no matter what. We are going to bring down duties. And he liberalized it. Floated the rupee. Rupee crashed from 8 rupees to 26 rupees within a space of 2 years. You can imagine what happens to cost structures when this kind of thing happens. There was a shortage of money. I remember spending night in ICICI. At that time it wasn't a bank, it was a development institute. And we were building a new plant. And we needed a pump from the US. The US was the only place which used to make that particular type of pump. For which we needed to pay dollars. And the country had no dollars to pay. And I spent the night at the ICICI trying to find some line of credit, begging the guy that if this pump doesn't come, my whole plant can't start. But he found it for me. Some German KfW line in a bank. He said, I've got so many Deutschmarks available there. And that time there was no euro, there was a Deutschmarks at that time. And he gave me the Deutschmarks saying that, look, I will convert that for you into dollars and please. And it was nightmarish those days. But we managed to make that plan work. So what happened was that the duty started coming down from 85% down to currently around 7.5%. And people started to play. But what they could not do is the size, and then the prices started dropping because imports started coming in. And they went into a downward spiral. It was not dumping of products at low prices by foreign competitors. That's the way it's written there. But clearly those people are selling it at their prices. It wasn't that they were lowering the price for India. Yes, marginally, because it's a marginal market. So if it's a marginal market, you will sell it marginally lower, and especially when you're introducing new products and getting new market share. But what happened when the products started dropping, the end users started to grow. When prices dropped, and it happened across all products, chemicals, everywhere. When prices started dropping, markets started growing, and volumes started building up. So the volumes built up. Today, that 4,000-5,000 ton market is today 35,000 tons. So it has grown. We are now about 5% of from 1%, we are now 5% of the global market. Yes, we're still small, because we're 16% of the global population. But that gives you a lot of headroom. That's for you guys to, over the next 10, 20 years, to build it. And what happened was the raw materials went through a cycle. The problem with chemicals is there is a lot of the raw materials are petrochemical based. These petrochemical bases goes through cycles. Now, why does that happen? Is because petrochemical plants are large, huge investments, and nobody wants to put up that huge investment unless there is some demand. And you have this problem of capacity coming in step functions. You build one plant, then you start exploiting it over a period. The demand is linear, the capacity goes step functions. There's always a misalignment of capacity and demand. Because plants are bang. You cannot just put marginal increments in chemical plants or petrochemical. So there's always a cycle. Either there's oversupply or there's a tightness. And the prices keep going up and down. As it happened in their raw material, the ethylene dichloride, which goes into PVC and the plastics, at that point in time had a shortage, so the prices went up. The raw material prices went up. Overcapacity in the ethylene means prices came down. And they went into a mess. The last part is very important. Something which relates to what Raj said earlier, the trust. They lost the trust of their customers because they started cutting corners on the product quality. It was a disaster. That is the last thing you should ever do. Something which is related. Back in 82, 83, when Alkyl Mines was in the same situation, we were making losses. I remember once taking a ride with my chairman, and he was a finance guy. He's still a finance guy. I don't know if you've heard of DSP Merrill Lynch. He was the chairman of DSP Merrill Lynch, and he was our chairman. And he told me, I know you guys are in trouble. I know you have cash flow difficulties, but just remember one thing. My family has been in the finance business for 130 years. And he was, I think, at that time, he became later on the president of the stock exchange. He was the fifth generation. His father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, and his great-great-grandfather all had been presidents of the stock exchange. It was the only surviving firm across the thing. And he says the only reason we have survived is because of the reputation. Do not let go of your reputation. Do not let go of your trust from the customer. If the customer is unhappy with your product, take it back. No questions asked. Correct everything and don't cut corners on the quality. And the second thing he told me is that make sure your employees are paid on time. They have families to run. They are coming to earn a living. Make sure they're paid on time. Of course, at that time I told him that, look, first I can keep track of. The second part, when I don't have money, how do I pay for the salaries? It's far more difficult to pay salaries when you don't have anything in the bank. And he said, okay, I'll keep my personal money, 10 lakhs aside in this account. Anytime you're going to miss a salary day, ring me up, then I'll transfer it to your account. That confidence that there was somebody behind me with pay the bill, I never had to touch that money. Work harder to make sure that we never had to use that money. But the fact that somebody told me this was very important. Somebody has faith in you is very, very important. When you're down and out and you're struggling and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, when somebody comes over and pats you in the back and says, don't worry, carry on. That's the fellows you should stick around with. They have seen life. So anyway, that's what happened to these people. And what did they do to recover? They sold their offices in Baroda and Ahmedabad to generate money. They got rid of work in process material at discounted prices. Sold off assets. Whatever they could to get off, they started not paying their vendors, stopped all outsourcing, brought in manpower because worked harder. They got rid of manpower. At one point in time, they had 230 employees. And at that time, Alcala Mines had only about 150. And we were alive and kicking. They looked at options of debottlenecking, but they had no money. Saying that let's bring it to global size. But by that time, they had no faith. No trust of the customers, and more importantly, of their owners. Syntex or the Bharat Railways had lost faith that you guys are going to be able to run this, because every time they made some promise, they had broken it. So don't make promises which you can't keep. If you are going to go wrong in your promise, go back and before he discovers it, you go and tell. This is something which I have learned also. During the bad times, I used to go to the bank to get more money and, plead for some concession here, some concession there. And I noticed one day that the lady, Mrs. Subramanian, who was the bank manager, used to call me in before the other two guys who used to also be hanging around. There was another company called ABS Plastics, now called Styrofoam. And he used to keep that guy waiting and he also called me in first. So one day I asked her, but ma'am, he's before me and how come you? He said, no, that guy is a liar. I know you are an honest guy. Anytime that anything goes wrong, I learn it from your mouth, not from somebody else. So just be careful. Be very, very honest with your bankers. If you're honest with your bankers, they'll back you. Because they know where you're coming from. That's the other aspect of being trust with the customer, trust with your investors, trust with your lenders. Just make sure that you don't tell them lies. Or if you have run into difficulty, tell them first, this is a problem. I have had a fire, or I have had a flood, or my customer has walked out, or whatever it is. And I'm going to face difficulty paying your interest or dues or whatever. But go up front, you will find that people will learn to trust you and back you when you need it. Anyway, so these are the kind of things that happen. And what did they finally do? They got, it was just by chance again. A lot of life tends to be, luck. And sometimes it just happens. So he happened to overhear a conversation with one of the foreign producers. And they gave him a proposal. Said, look, why don't we give you this particular stream of material which comes out from our factories, which is rich in piperazine, which is a higher ethylene amine, it's C6 plus. And you separate it out because there's very small quantities and we don't want to invest this kind of money and it's a messy thing and stuff like that. And you have the equipment, some of the equipment already set up and you know the business. And it happened that at that point in time, for that particular piperazine business, India was 25% of the world market. By which, this is I'm talking about the late 90s, Indian pharmaceutical industry had become very big. Today is probably the second or third largest volume producer in the world. And we are likely to be the largest very soon. The largest producer of pharmaceuticals in the world because of the volume. Now that's another story why it happened, because of the copyright, the issues and that kind of stuff. But it built the industry. And 25% of the market was in India. So he said, why don't you do this? So they made a plan. I will just show you what this you need to have a look to understand what the whole company is about. The top part is a regular way in which you make ethylene. You have the raw material, ethylene dichloride, ammonia, and caustic lye. The caustic lye is very NaOH, which strips the chlorine and it produces the salt as a byproduct. The EDC is the carrier of the ethylene. And you get ethylene diamine, diethylene, tetramine, triethylene, and it goes on. And piperazine is about 3% of the whole stream. Now that 3% stream, they did want to process. And they were making 100,000 tons of the ethylamines. So 3,000 tons of that piperazine is immediately. And that composition was something like this. 40% beta, 15 EDA, 5 EDA. And what you would do is you would retrofit your plant to separate all this out. That was the proposal. It made sense. You're a small fellow, you have the market. I don't want to get into this messy thing. Here it is. So they said, good, let's put it together. They went to the owner, Syntex. And Syntex said, oh my God, again, with another plan. Another plan to invest another 10 crores. No more, please. And they put up the numbers and they in Syntex said, we are not interested. So they said, okay, what we'll do is we'll fund a merchant backup. We'll find somebody to rescue.